Hey there friends, my name is Jim and today I'd like to talk to you about the Hunter Biden laptop story. Wait. I know you have it drilled into your head by the mainstream media that was just some old Russian disinfo piece that was shoved into the campaign by Trump in order to try and smear Biden, but it looks like there's more to the story than that. And actually, if you had actually followed this story from the beginning, you'd know there was more to it from that, but the mainstream media did such a just perfect job of making sure this story just never saw the light of day, and because of that, most people still think this is more tabloid nonsense. So today, I'd like to take a bit of a closer look at it to remind you out there just how debased all of this information was. But it's also important to remember that stories like this don't just come out of nowhere. Whoever is really in charge had this story completely locked down. Nobody would ever talk about it again unless somebody wanted us to. And what that means, I'm not so sure of. So, let's get into it. So before we move on, I want to remind you that talking about this kind of stuff is exactly what YouTube does not want on its platform. Therefore, the only way this information gets spread is viewers like you getting it out. So if you think this is worth hearing, please click on the link to this video, send it to a friend. Also, please like, share, subscribe, and if you think what I do is actually valuable, feel free to visit me on Patreon, Locals, or my website at www.jimmyjams.xyz. Linked below in the description. Now let's get into it. So right from the jump, I just want to let you know that this is not normal. You'll hear a lot in the coming days about Hunter Biden's laptop, and while it's definitely important, I have to say that it's weird it's coming out now. The New York Times just suddenly decided to verify this story, and they did not have to. While I think this is one of the biggest pieces of evidence we have against the powers that be, they had it totally sewed up. As I'll get into, there's blatant evidence of not only pay-for-play politics and making money off of the Biden name, but actual photos of him smoking crack and banging suspiciously young hookers. But none of it was important because the media monopolies decided this story was Russian misinformation. Honestly, the propagandists who were put in charge of this one should get a raise. They so successfully smeared the story as fake that it didn't have near the effect that it should have. As the Post-Millennial points out, nearly 20% of Biden voters would have changed their vote had they known the contents of the Biden laptop. Well, yesterday on March 17th, the New York Times officially stated that the laptop is real and was left in a computer repair shop and never picked up. I can see how this could be really annoying for some journalists, like the ones from the New York Post who had their Twitter account suspended when they first exposed the laptop in 2019, but that was an election year. You can't say bad stuff about Democratic candidates when we're trying to get rid of Trump. The censorship was so ridiculous that you had places like NPR saying the story was so obviously Russian propaganda that it isn't even worth talking about, putting out a text statement on their website saying, quote, "We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions." People need to understand that this is what news stations really are. People think that if NPR wasn't talking about the laptop story, then it must not be real, because if it was, someone would pick it up and get the best time slot for following such a big story. But in reality, the bosses at NPR consider the laptop story a waste of readers' time simply by virtue of it being bad for Biden. I want to remind you that never once did Hunter or Joe Biden say the laptop wasn't his, or that it was hacked, or that the images were doctored, or anything like that. The closest that ever happened was Hunter Biden putting out an interview while shilling his book saying that he doesn't remember because he was too consistently fucked up.
Yeah. Is that laptop yours?
You don't need the laptop. You got a book. You got the book. It's all in the book. And I don't know. I truly...
You don't know?
The serious answer is that I truly do not know the answer to that.
Now, of course, Hunter Biden denies giving his father any money, and Joe Biden apparently had no idea what Hunter was doing getting millions of dollars from Ukraine. As a matter of fact, there apparently wasn't even one single bit of evidence that Hunter Biden ever did anything untoward.
What's your understanding of what your son was doing for an extraordinary amount of money?
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it. And there's nobody...
Well, you've had a lot of time. Isn't this something you want to get to the bottom of?
No, because I trust my son.
But that doesn't pass the smell test. Like when you're vice president, isn't there a higher standard? Don't you need to know what's happening with your family? Don't you need to put down some guardrails?
Unless there was something that was, there was something on its face that was wrong. There's nothing on its face that was wrong. So look, if you want to talk about problems, you know, let's talk about Trump's family. I mean, come on. This is...
So
These guys are amazing.
And that brings us squarely back to Ukraine. Weird how that happens, huh? So let's just go over the timeline again to make sure we're all on the same page. So in 2014, Joe Biden was the Vice President of the United States, and his son Hunter had just gotten hired on a cushy position to be on the board of a Ukrainian gas company called Burisma. And by 2016, Burisma was in pretty hot water with the Ukrainian government. The state prosecutor Viktor Shokin wanted to show the Ukrainian people that the new government wasn't the same old Kremlin-controlled group that was overthrown in 2014 during the Euromaidan protests. Now, this government would stomp out corruption wherever it saw it begin to grow, and in Burisma, Shokin had found plenty of shady dealings. Through his investigation, he was able to name one Hunter Biden as a suspect, having received over $3 million in under-the-table deals. The emails that came from the Hunter Biden laptop would show that a not insignificant chunk of these dealings would go to a man who was only identified in writing as the big guy, whoever that could be. As Shokin was moving closer to officially pressing charges against them, who would step in but Daddy Dearest to make sure that his last living child would be taken out of this hot water? And if you don't take my word for it, here's the big guy himself.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
This has some really creepy implications for Ukraine, and to me should be grounds for every American to be calling for Joe Biden's impeachment. I don't care if you replace him with Kamala Harris or Nancy Pelosi, but we can't have someone in charge of our military strategy in Ukraine to have such deep conflicts of interest there. Maybe it would be good for Biden and his family to have Kiev turn into nuclear glass, or maybe he can't allow whatever dirty dealings he has there to fall into Putin's hands and will fight to the last man to keep him from there. I don't know, and neither do you, and that's enough to say we have one of the worst possible people guiding us through what many Ukrainian officials are already calling World War III. Back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had Kennedy and Khrushchev, and many historians credit these two guys' personal relationship and mastery of geopolitical strategy with keeping us from going over the tipping point. Back then, the news was trying as hard as possible to get any info they could to be the first to get the scoop out to the people. Now, we have big tech oligarchs colluding with millionaire news agency heads deciding whether or not you should be allowed to hear a story. Now we have Joe Biden, a dementia-ridden puppet for the global capitalist class, versus Vladimir Putin, a crazed dictator who poisons protesters with delusional dreams of a reborn USSR. Neither of these people are worth fighting for, and we certainly shouldn't allow their pissing match to make the world uninhabitable for anyone but cockroaches. I mean, this laptop shows a lot of different crimes that would have any other citizen thrown in jail for just having the pictures on their computer. For instance, in one of the text messages on a laptop, Hunter complained to his dad about how he was no longer around the children because he was, quote, sexually inappropriate with them, alongside him admitting that he smoked crack on FaceTime with them. Because of their work in government, Joe and Jill Biden are both mandatory reporters, by the way, meaning if they ever suspect child abuse anywhere, like even if they go to a grocery store and they see somebody slapping their child and they think that it might be child abuse, they have to report it or risk legal consequences themselves. But I guess laws like that are meant for the lesser peoples like you or me. It may behoove me to mention that the person he was talking about in the text, the mother of his children, was the wife of his brother who he cheated on while his brother was dying of brain cancer, just to give you an idea of how fucked up this family is. Now, despite pictures on the laptop allegedly showing Hunter doing things with kids, his Uncle Jim was quick to jump onto his side, saying him and Joe needed Hunter's side of the story to, quote, shove it down her fucking throat. Her, again, meaning the widow of the brain cancer wife who cheated with Hunter. On an entirely unrelated note, Jim Biden happens to own an island that is about 13 miles away from Epstein's famous pedo island. Also, while we're on the subject of conspiracies and weird kid stuff, it should be pointed out that Hunter has a particularly interesting tattoo on his back that was revealed in one of the laptop pictures. If you don't recognize it, it's a spitting image of the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. The Finger Lakes region is famous for underwater railroad tunnels and underwater passageways to Canada through Lake Ontario, which were used to be used to transport slaves during the Civil War and then later to throw rum through during Prohibition. While you're there, don't forget to visit Lucifer Falls and all the abandoned army depots. It's also infamous as a place in New York where kids just kinda disappear. It's one of those things that all the rich Hollywood types joke about between themselves, kinda like how they made jokes about Weinstein or Bill Cosby. You know, jokes that had nothing to do with reality.
I told him I was on a hike, snuck away to do this interview. I gotta get back pretty soon, don't worry. People disappear in the Finger Lakes.
Now, while that is just rank speculation, a little bit of fun, the rest of it isn't, and while the juicy part is the part with the kid stuff and the crack smoking, the real thing to take from this is Joe Biden has major conflicts of interest in Ukraine, and the fact that they allowed this story to go unreported 3 weeks before the election is blatant evidence of what we've known for a long time, which is the mainstream media is in the pocket of the Uniparty, or the globalists, or whatever you want to call them. Everything you see on the news is tainted by the owner's personal political mission, which always happens to be the one that enriches himself and his friends at the expense of the rest of us. Of course, the people they hire to be reporters won't rock the boat. They're happy in their positions up on the hill, and as long as they feel that sense of exclusivity, they will never betray those who fill their pockets. It's the same, if not worse, for social media companies, because at least news stations have been around long enough for laws to have been made about them. When you click on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or TikTok or whatever, you are not getting reality. You're getting a carefully tailored picture of what they want you to think reality is. They'll censor any information that you can't handle and make sure that your thoughts are the kind of thoughts that bring you to the conclusion that they have pre-programmed. Everybody around you is acting within this fake reality that the powers of be has created, a kind of self-imposed matrix, and we like it, is the truth. It gives us a false sense of safety and the thought that someone somewhere has the total picture and they're guiding our society onwards, always towards further progress and comfort. The reality is, we are walking along a precariously thin railing and it only gets thinner, and we're only walking faster while they lie and tell us everything will be fine. At least now, with this admission by the New York Times, we can stop pretending that the reality they feed us is the real thing.